Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show.
Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode, I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey.
Let me tell you about what punk rock is. This is punk rock, okay? For anybody out there that wants to know the definition, here's a definition. Imagine this, okay? You're going to leave where you work because you don't like how you're being treated. To be quite fair, to be quite honest, you're not being paid enough for your work. You're making a lot of money for that company. You feel like they don't really respect you because at the end of the day, they will always make more off of your back than you will ever make from the palm of their hand. Okay? That's reality in every job, my friend. Show me one that it's not, and that's where I want to work. But if you're working for a company, for a boss, he's probably paid a lot more than you are. Okay? But you don't like the way you're being treated. You know you're doing a lot of good work that's generating sales and revenue, but you're not getting paid enough for your efforts. They're making way more off of you than you can make from them. In fact, the margins are big. They're very big. You can't even get a t-shirt from them. Think about that, okay? So you decide to leave. On the way out the door, you take a few buddies with you. All right, fine. You take 6 other friends with you. 6, okay? So the 7 of you leave. And maybe they don't work for that specific company. Maybe they work for a competitor, a top competitor, all right? But you know them. They're your guys. You're all friends. And so you sell them on the idea of, hey, none of us are getting paid what we're owed, what we deserve. We work way too hard, and we're not getting compensated fairly. Let's start our own company, all right? So you decide to start your own company. So you get together as a group to go back to your company and say, we're done. Okay? We're gone. And not only that, see these guys that you love to have work here? They're not going to work here either. Okay? And then, just for giggles, you go and set up a meeting at the other company, that other competitor I mentioned earlier, that you don't work for. They see you roll in, you and your 6 friends, and they're drooling like dogs when the dinner bell rings, okay? Why? Because they think you're all coming to work for them. But why did you make the meeting? Just to tell them, hey, we're going to start our own company. We just thought we'd tell you. We have no desire to ever work for you. We're out of here. Peace. That, my friends, is the definition of punk rock. And what makes it even cooler is that the company that you put together 20 plus years later is still going. Scratch that. 30 plus years later is still going. Okay? That, my friends, is the definition of awesome. And it's very much the definition of punk rock. And it is also the story of image. If you are a comic book fanboy, you knew what I was going to say, who I was talking about when I said 7. I'm telling you, man, it's a big story. And if you didn't live through it, you missed it. But if you're a fan, you at least know about it, okay? Because like I said, it's huge. Let's get into it, kids. Image Comics is an independent American comic book publisher and is the 3rd largest direct market comic book and graphic novel publisher in the industry by market share. Its best known publications include Spawn, The Walking Dead, Kick-Ass, Invincible, Jupiter's Legacy, Witchblade, The Max, Savage Dragon, Bone, Saga, Radiant Black, and Stray Dogs. It was founded in 1992 by several high-profile illustrators as a venue for creator-owned properties in which comics creators could publish material of their own creation without giving up the copyrights to those properties. Normally, this is not the case in the work-for-hire dominated American comics industry, where the legal author is a publisher, such as Marvel and DC, and the creator is an employee of that publisher. Its output was originally dominated by superhero and fantasy titles from the studios of the founding Image partners, but now includes comics in many genres by numerous independent creators. And yes, they are number 3 in the big 3. And also, at one time, they were number 2. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. But that is the lowdown, essentially, a lot more to get to on Image Comics. Phil, you and I have talked about this on another show, and you mentioned that was sort of, before you actually got into Image, the story of the 7 guys. We're going to reference a couple of different documentaries here today, kids. One is the Image Revolution. The other one is the history of Image Comics, So Much Damage. They're both available on the YouTube. They're both really, really well done. They're really awesome. Phil, what do you think about the 7 here, man? What did you learn in these docs that maybe you didn't know before?
Well, one, that Rob Liefeld is once in a lifetime character, guys.
Yes.
Like his outlook on everything. There's only one Rob Liefeld. You love him or hate him, flaws and all. There's only one Rob Liefeld, and just if you get nothing else from watching these documentaries, just seeing him tell his stories and just everything about him, the little smirk he has the whole time, the stories that are said about him, well worth the price of admission.
He's been known to rub people the wrong way, time or two.
Yes, fans and all. Just all of the lore around this guy. Of course, the Heroes Reborn cover and everything that came out of this. But yeah, man, what a amazing story about 7 guys at one point that knew their value, looked around at the market and was like, well, wait a minute. If our comics are the highest selling comics and we're making this, there's something wrong with that. And instead of just sitting around and accepting it, let's do something. Because we have the power here. They need us. Let's go somewhere and let's capitalize on our success and our popularity right now and build something of our own. And I think that more creators need to do that because so much art, whether it be movies, comics, music, is so beholden to these big corporations and these companies somewhere making their money. Meanwhile, the artists aren't making the percentage that they're supposed to. So just straight off, I just have a tremendous amount of respect for what those guys set out to do. And it seems like, again, flaws and all, it was a success for the impact that it's had on the industry.
Amazing. And you talked about them not getting appreciated enough, not getting a large enough cut of the pie. Wasn't it Todd in one of these episodes that said they couldn't even get a T-shirt with Spider-Man on it? Like, what? Like,
insane.
Mind-blowing.
But yeah, those guys going off and building Image. I don't know that I knew that Rob Liefeld designed the logo. Did you know that?
I did, but I don't recall. And if there's one out there, I've never seen it. I don't recall a sketch or a video or an explanation. I know it came out in the docs, and it seems like I knew, but I don't think I knew from any one specific source. No.
Yes. But yeah, just the story of it, of Todd McFarlane deciding, no, I'm done with this. I'm moving on. I want to go out on my own. Hey, are you in? And then it spread like wildfire. He pitched it to somebody else, and then pitched it to that person, and then it took off. I would say it was fun to see just from that time period in the '90s and what that did for comics at the time and 7 artists going off and doing it, and then seeing what Image has become for writers that have come through that, because that's such a different era. That was really the era where I started reading some Image books when, like the guys like Kirkman or Bendis and Matt Fraction and those guys went over there and started making their impact on Image.
Mm-hmm. It really has changed. It is no longer the cape and tights brand, and that's fine. Like,
yeah,
the industry's changed to a great degree. There'll always be room for the capes and tights. That's what comic books are, but there's always also room for other things as well.
Yes. They're a lot of really great stories in these docs and great stats. I don't think that I knew that Spawn is still one of the highest selling indie comics today, probably the highest selling indie comic to date. Um, but just Todd McFarlane's popularity at his peak, that makes sense. And the runaway hit that Spawn turned into also makes sense.
It was an amazing time, and it was, we were there. I think I've always in my head said that my first comic convention was in 91, and I still think that's true. 92, let me tell you, the image stuff was everywhere. I mean, it was in June of 92, and like, and some of the books were infamously late and had been, but like, from that point on, you couldn't get away from image. And the excitement was palpable. The idea of this upstart group of talented guys, I had several friends who all knew who they were. And like, man, this was exciting. This was like something the comics industry had never seen it to that point, and I'm pretty sure it's not seen it like that since then. I mean, dude, what they did in 92 absolutely changed the game forever, Phil. We're still feeling the effects of it, and they are the legitimate number 3 brand of all time. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. It kind of feels like the story of Jerry Springer. Probably not exactly the same, of course. But at one time period, nobody on daytime TV was going to beat Oprah. Nobody could beat Oprah in ratings.
Mm.
And so when the Springer show first started blowing up, it was because, they had to change things because they were so down in the ratings. But the standard, the person at the top of this thing was Oprah. And so when they finally, punched God in the mouth, so to speak, and showed, oh, he bleeds. It's like, wait a minute. Somebody toppled Oprah?
Mm.
Like I said, unheard of at that time. And for like an indie comic company, like with these guys to topple DC and be at number 2 right behind Marvel, unheard of.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, crazy. Yeah. They pulled in front of DC, and it was, kids in 92, 93, we're not talking internet. We're talking the comics magazines. There was Wizard. God, I still miss Wizard. And I collected Wizard and one called Comic Scene. And there was, like the various sci-fi mags that were out there. And, we started reading headlines that they had pulled ahead of DC. And I'm like, this is the craziest. Look, even then, as a teenager, I knew this was the craziest thing maybe I would ever see in the industry. Like, it was mind blowing, dude. And I don't know how much fans, I think now it's different. I don't know how much at the time, even me, could appreciate just how, and when I say mistreated kids, I'm not talking, it's not horrible. It's not, these guys were, still making money and feeding their families. But the point of it all is that, they're watching these properties be developed and all this merch being sold and, TV projects and movie projects, even before the MCU started. But like, at least these things are being sold to studios and ideas are being pitched, and they're not a part of any of it. And like, they don't get a say. They don't get to nothing. They're not consulted. Doesn't matter. And it's like, well, Tom, McFarlane didn't create Spider-Man. I don't care. Like, I mean, Phil, the Spider-Man book was slumping. The Spider books were doing nothing when Todd came in. And dude, he did so well, they gave him his own book. Well, I remember when that book was released. It was the biggest thing you'd ever seen. Like, it was insanity, man. Craziness. I mean, now we know, of course, Spider-Man is the linchpin. He was the linchpin then. He's always going to be a cornerstone for that company, Phil. But just imagine, like, Spider-Man of all characters, there's just not much going on. And then Todd comes in with all this, enthusiasm and this dramatic artwork that, I'm sure he gets credit for, but man, his art just jumps off the page. What did you, as an artist, what did you think about the bits of the doc where he was talking about Marvel telling him he couldn't draw this and you can't do that and you can't have it coming out of It has to be confined to the box. You can't have, you got to turn it this way and you can't do this. Like, dude, it seemed very, very controlling, to say the least.
Yeah, unfortunately, when you're playing in somebody else's sandbox, and you're getting the paint, but you're also having to paint in the confines of what someone else already created, that kind of comes with it. And of course, Todd McFarlane is very influential on Spider-Man comics and the way that Spider-Man is drawn. I mean, just from the creation of Venom. And also, I believe he's the first person to draw the webbing the way that it's drawn, to draw the strands that way. And that has completely changed the way people draw Spider-Man. But at the same time, you're still in the confines of what Stan Lee and Ditko created. You can't go too far outside of the margins. And that's unfortunately a part of the creative process when you're working for an entity as big as Marvel and one of their flagship characters.
Yeah, I mean, and I can understand that to a point. I do understand that. But, just look at how Spider-Man was drawn after Todd did it versus before.
Yes.
Right? Like, it's just...
He's definitely one of the most influential Spider-Man artists of all time. Like I said, just the changes in how the webbing was drawn, the changes in how his anatomy was drawn and everything. There's just no denying it. And so, I could absolutely see his point of view of like, I was very beneficial for you guys, and I didn't make enough money to justify that. I want to go out and I want to do something. I want to create something of my own. I mean, they talked about in the doc, but Spawn being so ahead of the curve at that time, when some people were kind of embarrassed of like trying to build something out of comic books as an IP. And at that time, what Spawn turned into as a movie, that was unheard of. An indie comic book turning into a movie. It had got its own cult following. The HBO TV show, and everything that came out of that. And there's so many success stories that come out of Image like that. And that's just such a proof of the impact that they've had on the industry.
Yeah, and dude, that HBO animated series is still classic.
Yeah, great stuff. I mean,
Man,
more undeniable than a movie, in my opinion.
I agree with that. I was excited for both, but that series really did something for that company, for that brand, for that character. And, it's such the best characters, Phil, go back to simple stories. Like a child sees his parents murdered in front of him. He grows up and goes on a mission to protect others so they don't have to go through that. That's a very simple thing. Like Al Simmons gets murdered and makes a deal with the devil to come back. Like, hey, you need to be my spawn. You need to be my servant. Fine, I just got to get back to my wife. But because it's the devil, he comes back 5 years after the fact. He's so scarred up, he's unrecognizable. And oh, by the way, she's married his best friend. Like, I don't know about simplistic, but man, what a story. You know what I mean? What a backstory, Ted. Did you ever get into Spawn, by the way?
I didn't read the books, but I did, of course, like the movie, like a lot of us, and I did watch the HBO cartoon. But I can't say that I read the books, no.
It was, it was different because pretty sure Todd was writing and drawing for a long time there. It was exciting. And, I mean, the cover, just the covers alone were enough to get you excited. And I mean, I was on board for all the Image books to begin with and have like a bunch of number ones that are now worth not a lot of money. Well, because they printed a ton of them. That's the problem,
That was that period, man. That was the time period of foil covers and tons of variants. And people were just like, well, I have a number one, so it should be worth something. No, scarcity is what makes something valuable. And if there is an overabundance of something, it's worth nothing.
Yeah. Yes. Dude, there was die cut covers, there was hologram covers, there was pop-up covers, there was 3D covers.
Bro, the poly bags and stuff like that.
Yes.
That time period. But man, I think that that's such a great thing you touched on with the covers, and I love that they talk about that in the documentary of how, yeah, there was a lot of criticism about the writing of that time, but boy, did it look great, and that's probably 75% of it. 85% of it is getting people to open the book and be curious enough to pick it up and take it home. Is what does the cover look like? Or if you've got a striking cover, that makes up for the rest of this because that's going to sell a lot of books. Just people seeing that cover, like, oh, what is this?
Oh, it does so much. I mean, as a fan, how
Yes,
many books have you bought over the years, Phil, where maybe you weren't familiar with the characters, but that cover just grabbed you?
yes. Cover grabbed you, or you saw a creator that you know and you're familiar with on a cover of it. Oh, well, I like his work, so I'm going to pick this up just to support them.
Hmm.
And at that time period, like they were saying, these were seven of the hottest artists in the industry, and they went somewhere else, and their name is plastered over it. Their art style is all over the cover of it, and it's so unique to their work.
Hmm.
So of course, the fans were going to follow them no matter what.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure I can do it to a point now, but there was once upon a time I could look at a cover and tell you who drew it.
Hmm.
May not be able to tell you who inked it, but I know who drew it. And I took pride in that because I was just so in tune. It's like being able to listen to a song, and you know who the bass player is or the guitarist is just by the sound. I mean, it's you just fall in love with this stuff. And comic books, as we know, is a very visual medium, of course, and it grabs your attention. I don't want us to go too far without mentioning these guys. We've already mentioned Rob and Tom, or Rob and Todd, excuse me. But kids, you know the seven, but we're going to rattle them off here for you. You got Jim Valentino, who I love. Dude, Jim comes off like the stoic veteran, the wise man in the room. Every time he's on camera, he's the most chill. He's the most calm. Like, I think Valentino is fantastic, man.
Yes. He definitely comes off that we got the Beatles comparison multiple times throughout
Mm.
this, that they felt like rock stars. They were the Beatles. If they were the Beatles, he was absolutely George Harrison. He was very much like, nah, I just want to make my own stuff.
No kidding. That's good.
All the rest of this infighting, I don't care about none of that. I just want to make my stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Jim's a talented guy, too. Very talented guy. And I mean, you can absolutely connect each founder with what, he was doing when the company started. Because, like, Valentino was Shadowhawk. And then Mark Silvestri, who did Cyberforce, Whilce Portacio, who did Wetworks, but he was never on the board of directors because, as the story goes, while he was one of the founders, in the midst of everything happening, he had a family emergency out of the country that he had to leave to attend to, and it took him out of a lot of the, I guess, paperwork and the initial setting up of the company. He's credited, but he never sat on the board of directors. So
Yeah.
that's interesting. We have also got, of course, Todd McFarlane, of course, and Rob Liefeld. And then we've got Erk Larsen, Savage Dragon fame. I have a friend I haven't seen in many, many years. He loved Savage Dragon. He got Savage Dragon tattooed on the side of his leg, hanging like with his hands nailed, like he's been nailed to his leg, like on the cross. And he paid all kinds of money for it. He was so proud of that tattoo. Coolest thing he'd ever seen. But that's how much he loved Savage Dragon. It was everywhere on him. He wore it all the time. And then I'm saving Jim Lee, Phil, because as the story goes, they all, especially Todd, considered Jim Lee the golden boy.
Yes.
And that if they could get Jim, they knew they had something, which scared the crap out of DC. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, what Jim represented at that time period, well, really what Jim still represents to comic book artists. Uh, he's a superstar. Like when you see his name, it rings off. It matters.
Mm.
And at that time period, X-Men #1 was the top selling comic book, and his art style was such a big part of the reinvention of that book. And I think that's what says so much about these seven guys striking out on their own. Like like we know of like the golden era of Marvel, like Stan and Ditko and Jack Kirby and what they did. But after that time period, the artists that influenced that time period right after them, and a lot of the years to come after that, was those guys, Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld, big muscles, big pouches,
Big pouches.
jackets, and those guys popularized that style that turned into a lot of the nostalgia around that time period. I mean, X-Men the animated series does not exist in the way it does without Jim Lee's artwork. And
You're
so,
right. Yeah.
yeah, he was, man, getting Jim Lee to go out on his own is huge.
So cool. Wildcats.
Yeah, I think about the theme song to Wildcats more than I would like to admit. I can't tell you what happened in most of the episodes of that show, but I always think of the theme song in the opening credits because it is the most '90s thing ever.
Isn't that crazy how, I mean, of course, well, it's not too crazy, Phil, that it's easier to get animation, rolling than it is live action. Much bigger budgets than live action.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Yeah,
amazing. I don't even know how long that cartoon ran, to be honest. I'm sure, I think it ran for a long time, didn't it?
yeah, and I mean, it just goes to show the power of TV and like right now, the power of YouTube. It's just how times have changed. That comic books are so niche, and especially at that time period, there weren't as many movies outside of like the, Superman and Batman, but like it was so much easier to get those kind of properties turned into a cartoon because that's how it was seen at that time. Comic books are for kids, and so it's
Mm.
easy to market this still to kids and get an animated show made. And that did so much for those characters. A lot of people that didn't have access to comics and or maybe they just bought them like I did anytime I saw them in like a convenience store or something. Um, that introduced us to so many of these characters. I say all the time, that was my introduction to Spider-Man was the animated series. I didn't start buying Spider-Man comics until after the animated series. And I'm sure a lot of people that was their introduction to Wildcats or Static Shock or so many other characters.
That's a good point, man. Like, it calls you to start buying. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, dude.
Yeah, because I mean, television just has a wider audience than print because not everybody knows to just go to a local comic book store. Not everybody has the access to just go and buy comics. And currently, comic books are more accessible than they ever were. You can just go on an app and buy comics now. Like you can just Google a comic book store if you want it
Mm.
and find the nearest one. That wasn't a thing when we were growing up.
No, not at all. By the way, the Wildcats TV series, in '94, you won't believe this. It only had 13 episodes. Did you
That makes
realize it
sense.
was that few?
I did not know that, but it's just so funny that it made that mark at that time. I believe it came on Saturdays, right? I think it came on
Oh, I'm
CBS
sure.
on Saturdays.
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. Which, they had to make it kid friendly. Voodoo was no longer an ex-stripper. Can't really be doing that. So they turned into a teenager. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's fine. But, I mean, it made it. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people who, I honestly, thinking about who's pulling against them at that time, you'd have to believe some top brass in Marvel and DC weren't too happy about this. But if you are writers and artists in the two companies, how could you pull against these guys, man? Like,
Yeah. Of course, creators probably did. Maybe some creators might have felt the way, but yeah, of course, the company I absolutely had to feel away with the way that they pulled out of Marvel, and then they kind of rubbed everybody's nose in it. I had the meeting with DC and rubbed their nose in it.
it's wonderful. Not only are we not going to work for Marvel, we're not going to work for you either. Well, see you later. Like,
Yeah, I love when they tell the story. They're just kind of like the DC execs were looking around like, well, who are you guys? You don't work here, and you're not going to work here, and then you're bringing Jim Lee in here, who we don't even know about, and poor Jim. Jim is trying to play it down like, oh, they didn't know who they were, bro. They absolutely knew who you were, Jim. You had the number one selling comic with X-Men. They knew who you were. They're the
They know
reason
who you
why
were.
when you came back later, they bought your Wildstorm imprint, and why he's been such a big fixture in DC for years to come after that. They built their whole reboot around Jim Lee.
Yeah, dude, they absolutely knew who he was. Like when he sold Wildstorm to DC, I vividly remember that happening and being very disappointed. Like
Yeah.
thinking, man, the corporate won. Corporate
Yeah.
guys won.
Yeah. Yeah, I know people to this day that like are very upset with the idea of DC owning Wildstorm and what they've done with Wildstorm. It kind of feels like WWE buying ECW. Like
Mm,
I know some people that will just never support it.
yeah. Yeah. I just and Jim's their guy. He's their guy.
Yeah.
Isn't he in Jeff John's chair that Jeff used to have there?
I don't know what his exact role is at this point, but he was like
Hmm.
instrumental when they rebooted the entire universe, and he was given a lot of creative control. But that's just because he's such a big name in his industry. I mean, he talked about when he went back to Marvel after everything, and he got to. They basically gave him the keys to the kingdom with certain characters because this is Jim Lee. We already know he's a proven commodity. I mean, that's why Todd wanted him.
He is the president, publisher, and chief creative officer of DC Comics. Yeah,
Wow.
man. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it helps him to play certain things down. But yeah, still very humble, which I love about Jim.
Hmm.
And when he's talked about how everybody else is like rocking out and everybody's like, man, we really did that. He's like walking around with his kid
Mm-hmm.
in a harness trying to keep her asleep and rock her to sleep. And you got Rob Liefeld jumping up and down on beds and Todd walking around like, yeah, we really stuck it to him.
I mean, I knew Jim from Punisher War Journal, and that was Carl Potts was the writer. Jim Lee was the artist. So I knew Jim way before he ever landed the X-Men. So like it was so cool to be able to say I kind of was around to follow him as he rose. And really the same with the other guys, honestly, because I just happened to be born at the right time and was collecting when I was collecting. But man, it was something to watch.
Boink Studios is the home of Tom Clark's main event, Tom Clark's 6M podcast, and Two Nations Under Ted, a Ted Lasso podcast. Visit the site today for links to every podcast platform, social media, special announcements, and a lot more. Check out the site and bookmark today, boinkstudios.com.
But yeah, dude, this idea that they were all really young and rebellious and just sticking it to them, and it worked. Like, yes, they had some infighting. Yes, there was some things. Rob got kicked out, and then he came back, and like, I mean, Rob being Rob, right? He is definitely the wild card of the group for sure.
He's the one that you could see from the beginning getting kicked out. Just everything, like him saying, "Well, I was really the guinea pig. I got out there and I roasted up real good, and everybody was like, hey, that did
Yeah.
pretty well. Let me
Yeah.
do it too." But I had never seen some of that footage, like him on the late night shows, that commercial he did. I'd never seen any of that.
Oh man. When that Button Fly commercial came on the TV, brother, let me tell you, I was such a nerd, still am, such a nerd for it and so excited. Like, freaking Rob's on the TV. This is insane. Like,
yeah, I mean, and it all tracks because I mean, as somebody that grew up loving comics, grew up drawing, and at one point wanted to be a comic artist, like those guys, man, those names, they mean something. I said, it's Todd McFarlane, bro. Like, uh, same thing with Jim Lee, like probably one of the most well-known comic book artists in the world.
mm-hmm.
And for better or worse, same thing with Rob Liefeld. I mean, no matter what you can say about the guy, flaws and all, people know who Rob Liefeld is.
Mm-hmm. And look, without Rob, we don't get Deadpool. And I'm not,
No.
and I mean Fabian Nasizia, which I'm sure I always get Fabian's last name wrong. Without Fabian and Rob, of course.
Yeah.
But take Rob out of that. Maybe Deadpool has, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he doesn't look like the way he does. Who knows, man?
Yeah. No, absolutely deserves all of his credit. You may not like everything he does or says, but he absolutely deserves all of his credit. And the other guys, Mark Silvestri as well.
Mhm.
A Mark Silvestri art when you see it. A Mark
so
Silvestri
good.
cover when you see it.
So good.
It's just undeniable. And some of the guys that came after them that they influenced, the late great Mike Turner, rest in peace to him.
Yeah.
And what he did with the Witchblade stuff,
Mm-hmm.
undeniable. Like you said, Erk Larsen, that run on Savage Dragon, and how much an impact that had on indie comics, how much that had an impact on the way that people draw. All of these guys had such a massive impact on the way that people draw comics. Like, there's X-Men before Jim Lee, and then there's X-Men after Jim Lee,
Mm-hmm.
and how much that influenced like the way people see the X-Men. People have spent years after this trying to have that level of impact on those characters, and that's not an exaggeration in any way.
Yeah. No, not at all. And I mean, Dragon's still going. I'm pretty sure Savage Dragon's still going. And Eric had that character as a teenager.
Yeah.
Like, it just finally got the chance to actually do it for real.
Yeah.
So cool, man. As a creator, you love to hear those stories.
Yeah, it's just something about that. Like, again, as somebody that grew up enjoying comic book art, and as somebody that drew, seeing artists take that stand and going out on their own and really pushing the envelope, man, it was just unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a cool moment in time. Of course, the '90s and the crash of the industry that came afterwards. I very much feel like they were unfairly blamed for it. Because that's just where the market was going. I think people felt like the party would never die. Like, they were making so much money, and you know that with that time period, like I said, with variants, the foil covers, they brought up the death of Superman and like the growth of miniseries and just how oversaturated the market was. It was inevitable that it was going to be some kind of implosion. It just couldn't last forever.
No, there was no way. It couldn't maintain, and they didn't have anything to do with it. It was the baseball trading card guys. After they went in and, quite frankly, blew that industry all to pieces, they decided to come in and do the same thing in comic books, and it blew it up, which of course it did.
Yeah. Consumerism will always do that. When people think, oh, I can go here and make some money, and everything has that moment where there's this craze, like the Beanie Babies phase. Remember that? And
Oh,
people
yeah.
thought how this is going to be worth something someday. Let me collect as many as I want. Right now the Funko Pops, and just like it just goes on and on with these things. The Pokemon trading cards, just so many things like where people are like, oh, this is going to be it. This is going to be the thing that is going to be my nest egg.
Yeah. Yes. Well, look, as the old guy in the room, I cannot sit here and say that I believed that every book I was buying was going to be worth thousands of dollars one day. But I also could not tell you that I didn't believe they wouldn't.
Yes.
Because, dude, you just got caught up in the fever of the excitement of the time and about, just like I said, the covers just grabbed you, and the stories were, sometimes not great, but you just believed in the guys so much, and the concept of, Image is, you own your creation. We won't make $1 off of it. They take money from the back end, and that's the only way they get paid. And it's the only way the Image is still around today. Dude, they've never changed their formula. Like, that's exciting stuff, man. I was behind it. So, like, I bought multiple first issues, mostly because they were polybag. I didn't want to open them. So, I still have I still got 2 copies of X-Force #1 when Liefeld was at Marvel. I mean, I do. I still got 2 copies of the Death of Superman issue and the Return of Superman issue. I got all the multiple covers of Jim Lee's X-Men #1, multiple covers of Spider-Man #1. Buddy of mine got the gold cover of Spider-Man #1, which at one time was worth some serious cash.
Whew.
Yeah, probably isn't now, but
Yeah, I mean, I have like prized possession stuff, like, but I've never been a collector. I've never been like, oh, I'm buying this stuff and hoarding it because I think this is going to be worth something someday.
no.
I was just such a fan of the medium and just the storytelling of it. And I was such a fan of the art. Um, I mean, when I used to go to conventions, a lot of times I would just hang out in Artist Alley, just walking around, looking at people's art and talking to the artists. I'll never forget this. uh, I don't know if you know who Kieran Gillen is, right?
Kieran Gillen?
Kieran Gillen, yes.
No, I don't know if I know that name.
Artist, he's done like ink and stuff. He's I'm trying to think of things that he's worked on. But I was walking around and I was looking at his art and I was like, I was asking him all these questions like, okay, so when you ink and like, because ink is just so unforgiving. Like once you put that, it's the same thing with paint. Like once you put it down on this paper, you got to live with those marks.
It's there.
It's there. You gotta. And so he was like, yeah, you can lift the ink some. You can use this, and you can use this medium. Maybe you can use. I was like, okay. And so I was asking him all these questions. He was like, are you an artist? And I said, no, yeah, I draw as a hobby. He was like, you can tell an artist when you see him. That's why I asked. And he was like, as an artist, you can always tell an artist the way that they talk, the way that they appreciate things. You can always tell. And I always thought that was funny. But like, I was always the type of guy that like I ran my comics into a ground as a kid because I was constantly flipping through them and opening them and holding them open and holding splash pages open and trying to copy somebody's style or trying to recreate something. So I just never thought about collecting.
I've met, shook his hand and had conversations a few different times with John Romita Jr. And, freaking legend, that guy.
Yes.
And I'd heard him say at a con one year, someone was asking him about, because he had a stack of books right there, none of them were bagged. And he's like, comic books shouldn't be bagged. He said, these things should be rolled up and stuck in your back pocket. That's what they're made for.
Yeah.
And he's always stuck to that, man.
And I'm from a time period where I was hard on my comics, man. Not so much as I am now. I was hard on my comics because, like I said, I would, throw them in a spinal notebook and like have them in between pages where I was trying to draw and stuff. And it wasn't like I was thinking like, oh man, I better keep this in pristine condition. I don't want to get a fingerprint on it or something. Man,
Right.
like I said, I flip through these things constantly.
Right. Of course. Well, they're made to be read for sure.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's so many people that drew comics and that's how they became a fan of these things. That's how they had the dream of wanting to create, of like opening these things and they take you somewhere else. And it's like, I legitimately believe, and I'm now going into down a rabbit hole, but I legitimately believe that writers and artists, like, they're like the closest we're gonna get to magic in real time. Like being able to take a blank page, being able to turn something into that's nothing, that's completely blank into something. It's magic. It's like they're just going in and taking a blank page and putting something on it, and it turns into something useful.
Yeah,
it's alchemist.
It is. It's alchemy at its highest form. Yeah.
And so I just have so much respect for what they do. And so for those guys to do that and be able to take that somewhere else and know their value and everything that they've created, and then prove it to make money and to make this impact, it's unbelievable, man. It's also why I hate this AI craze. I don't want to get on a soapbox, but I hate it. I hate things like people making their profile pictures these Studio Ghibli things. Like, bro, Miyazaki made it his life work to create these movies that people love in his style, with like these wonderfully well-crafted painted images. And you're taking AI and recreating it. I
Terrible.
hate it. I hate everything about it.
Terrible. And I'm gonna tell you, man, AI is a hot button topic for creators, man. For sure. Not just writing, but art, of course. And you and I have talked about, there's been high level artists in Marvel and DC both, I think, that got busted, got found out.
Ugh.
Crazy. And look, I'm gonna be honest. I use AI on the work front, but I've never used it for my own creative purposes unless I'm using it for voiceovers for my podcast. Because it's, I don't really want all the things to sound like me, which I've been countered on that by people in the past. Well, it should be proud of it. You should put your own voice. I'm like, I am proud of what we do, what we do here. Absolutely. But I know what I sound like. I'm not exactly presenting at the Oscars. You know what I mean? I know what I sound like. So like, it's fine for the show, hopefully, but I don't know if I want my voice splattered all over every promotional piece of video that I produce for Boink Studios. I don't think I want that. So like, I use AI, but dude, I'll sit down behind AI, Phil, and I'll tell it. I tried this one time and I fed it like links of my own writing. And I'm like, because I just wanted to see, can it learn me? And then I asked it to write something. And I read it, and it's not bad. But I'm like, it's not me. It's not how I would have done it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's something soulless to it.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, that's just the artist in me speaking, that it's something about it that feels very soulless and empty.
Yeah.
And that's something I just will never really appreciate or understand about it. But it's a tool just like anything.
Yes.
And so I get some people that use it for some things, but man, it's such a slippery slope. It's such a slippery slope, man.
It's a tool. Like, that's the best. Listen, at the end of the day, if we just think of it as a tool and not the primary instrument to do the work, it is a tool in the toolbox. You would not take your claw hammer and paint your house. You wouldn't take the claw hammer and fix your car. But you could drive a nail. Well, that's what AI is. AI is meant to do, it's a tool, but it's not meant to do everything. That's the difference.
Yes, but see, the problem with humans,
Yes.
is that we will always find a way to let something get out of control, and people will always take something that makes our life easier and over rely on it. And that's the scary thing about AI. I don't want to get in my soapbox about it, but I don't have the best feelings about it.
Over relying is the best way to put it. And, there's many jobs out there that possibly are being threatened and maybe have already been eliminated. And look, it can work so incredibly fast, and it's faster than a search engine. But dude, you have to do your legwork to verify and confirm the information is accurate. And that takes even more time. So like, it can create outlines. I know, because I've used it in the working world. It can create quick outlines. It can put together strategy, and it can learn based on what you're giving it, and, give it the right prompts. It's something I found that to always be helpful is to tell it, ask me questions about this, because it can't do as well as it could do unless it has as much information as possible. But again, like you said, people are using it for other things, and it's becoming too widespread, and the art is so very... My fear, Phil, is that right now we know the art, we can see it. What happens when we get to the point that you can't see it anymore? You can't tell.
Yes. And technology is just too good. It'll eventually get there.
Yeah.
It's just too good.
It is.
And it's scary, man. It's scary because what this means for artists and what this means for a lot of people that make a living doing these things, whether it be writing and art. It's scary. It's very scary to me.
It is. Well, in regards to, we didn't have any of this issue back then, of course. When we saw an artist, we saw his work, that was his work. We didn't have to worry about anything like that. When I was growing up, there was no AI, of course. It was tracing. Which, as a kid, Phil, if you didn't know how to draw, That's a great way to learn. Like,
Yes. And it's the same thing. Like a light box is a tool.
yes.
And, if you use a light box correctly, it can accentuate your ability, but it shouldn't be a crutch.
Hmm.
It should, you can use tracing as a learning tool to learn how to, you know, replicate style, or like learn things about anatomy that you didn't know. But it
Mhm.
shouldn't be something that you rely on to create art, in my opinion.
I agree with that. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's a slippery slope, man. That no doubt about it.
Yeah. What we just talked about, the impact of Todd McFarlane or Jim Lee, and reducing that to a few button clicks. Yeah.
Phew, man,
I hate everything about that.
I hate everything about that. Yeah. Well, look, to your point, we've been blowing these guys up because they deserve it. I don't think we're overstating anything. We're probably understating how important these guys are.
Yes.
Dude, we're still talking about Hush, the Batman storyline. We're still talking about it. That thing was. I'm trying to think of when Hush in the early 2000s. I think, like, dude, we're
Like
still talking about it.
2005, 2006, something like that.
Man, isn't that something? Like,
Yeah. And there's countless artists like that.
Yes.
Like Tim Sale, and like what his books did at the time was Jeff
yeah.
Loeb. I just thought about that because Jeff Loeb wrote Hush as well.
Yep.
I'm trying to. I think it was 05, 06 or something like that. Let's Google's. Here we go. 2002.
Oh, there you go. Earlier than I thought. Yeah.
October 2002 to September 2003.
Oh, dude, that was the hottest book. It was red hot when that thing was out, man.
Yeah.
Man, live.
People actually thought they did the unthinkable and resurrected Robin, and that turned into the thing where he was actually brought back to life.
Yeah, I still hate that. I still hate that. Yeah, I just DC used to brag that DC was where characters stayed dead. They actually used that tagline in some stuff. And boy, that changed when they brought Jason Todd back, buddy.
Yeah, I always hated Jason Todd, and when they brought
Everybody
him back,
did.
I was like, ah. And he's turned into like a fan favorite for a lot of people.
Mhm.
But I was around for the time period where he was first introduced, and a lot of it was timing, and a lot of it had to do with just how beloved Dick Grayson was. But yeah, I was never a fan. Never a fan of
Dude,
Jason Todd.
when Death in the Family happened, they set up that hotline where you could save him or kill him.
What a
And
time.
I totally voted. I totally called.
I don't remember if I was old enough at the time
Oh.
to call, and I definitely didn't buy the books. But the lore of it is just so funny to me.
Yeah, it was wild. It was a wild time. And we always said, certain characters will never come back. One of them is Bucky. Bucky will never come back. Well, guess
Yeah.
what?
Hey man, and respect to Ed Brubaker, because I would have been wrong at the time when people were like, they're gonna bring Bucky back and he's gonna become one of the best comic book characters of the past decade.
Yeah.
Who would have
Yeah.
guessed? And he's actually
Nobody.
turned out to be one of my favorite Marvel Comics characters of all time. Big fan of Winter Soldier.
And not only, I was going to say the MCU. Look, imagine the MCU without the Winter Soldier. There goes the entire Captain America movie. I mean, storyline, everything.
Yeah, how that played into Avengers, how that played into Endgame, and so many things. The video game right now, Marvel Rivals, he's in that. There's so many things that that's had a big impact on, and that's just part of what we mean here. Ed Brubaker is probably one of the most influential Captain American creators of the past decade. Just like everything he's done with that book and what that turned into in other media. And I'm sure he doesn't make anywhere near the percentage that he should off of those things.
No, I'm sure he
And
doesn't.
so it's great that he's gone off and done other things. Like I was a big fan of Velvet with Image. And that's
Mm.
what I'm saying. Like there's a certain time period of Image books that I was reading those books. Like maybe not right at the beginning because I wasn't buying books in the early 90s, but man, that time period with Velvet and Saga and uh East of West and man, love that stuff.
I mean, we don't get The Walking Dead. We don't get Invincible.
Deadly
We don't.
Class.
Yes.
Love Deadly Class as well.
Yeah. There's any number of things we don't get had this movie. Kingsman doesn't
Yes.
happen. Yeah. Um, Happy, which they mentioned in the doc, which was very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I was glad to see Powers get acknowledged and what that did
Yeah.
for Image at one point, and just the rise of Brian Michael Bendis and him going from like this indie darling to becoming one of the biggest names in comic at one point.
It's true. We have to give Eric Stevenson a shout out. He was named the publisher, named the head of Image, and he oversaw some big stuff happening for sure. So let's see. In November 2021, they actually formed the Comic Book Workers United, a trade union affiliated with the Comic Communication Workers of America. And so they unionized, which is great. As long as it's working. I've always said union's great until a big company or some shady characters get their fingers in the pie. And then suddenly it's not about the workers anymore. It's about making the guys at the top even richer.
Yes.
That's the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, but I mean, just the books we just named and that impact of what Image created,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't just become this thing where those 7 guys made something, but like some of the biggest names in comics that worked at Marvel and DC, they've come to Image and they've had their impact on Image, like Bendis, like we said, or Hickman, or Rick Remender, or Matt Fraction,
Mm.
Ed Brubaker. So many guys that were doing so much great work elsewhere, and they were able to go there and do creator-owned work. I think that's incredible.
Mm-hmm. It means something. That's the point, is that it means something. And like, talk about alchemy. Like, I was thinking about this a lot. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, man. As podcasters, you and I talk a lot about this. But like, at some point, I don't know if I'll call it fatigue, but at some point you kind of sit back and go, I don't know, what am I doing? Like I've had that for the past couple weeks, if I'm being honest. And this happens occasionally to me. I've been doing this for 11 years now. So it's, occasionally I stop and have some moments of doubt. But dude, whether it's a podcast or a graphic or a short story or whatever, to create something that was not there until I created it gives me the weirdest, most oddly satisfying rush. And I can't say that it's like, I don't know how to describe it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
It does something for me. And I can sit there and be so, to this day, I'm like, man, that looks good. Like, I'm so proud of this. And then like, at the end of the day, who cares except me? Maybe nobody, but still it doesn't matter. Cause I don't know what I'm trying to satisfy Phil. And maybe that's the secret recipe, is that none of us really know what we're trying to satisfy with this, but that urge to make something out of nothing and then being like over the moon, like possibilities are now open because you made this thing. And I'm like, I mean, I know better, but man, it still satisfies a craving. I can't even put it into words, man. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And I think it goes both ways, not just as a creator, but a consumer,
Mm.
and realizing that the medium could be bigger than just superhero properties. To see something like Powers that it's so different, or like the Jinx books that Bendis was doing, and to see these guys be able to turn something like noir and like detective stuff into comic books, and I mean, of course, that existed before with like the pulp stuff, with like the shadow and all the rest of the stuff. But just to see that this medium that I thought was one thing be something else was also really, really cool.
Mm. Yeah, there's I'm going to their which they have got licenses over the years too. They got the GI Joe license as we speak, which is pretty big. Spawn is still going, which is awesome. Violator, they got the Transformers license, which is also very cool. They've got a book called Geiger, which I'm not familiar with. They've got Lore, which I've heard about but have never read. Let's see. Criminal. Did you read Criminal by Brubaker?
I didn't.
I've always wanted to check that out, and I've never done it.
Me too. But it was one of those books that I saw a lot of people talking about from afar, but I never got into it.
Man, I need to check that out. I need to put that on the list for the con this year.
Yes. Yeah, when I was like, definitely watching the documentary made me nostalgic for that time period around like 08 and into like the late 2000s, where I was like I was going to conventions, I was going to stores every week. And man, when Kirkman talked about a pool box, I was like, man, I haven't thought about a pool box in so long.
Yes. God, let me just tell you. For me, it was a bag. It was always the pull bag. And brother, I collected. I mean, I if I waited 2 weeks and went to pick up, it was a mountain of books. Like I'm talking War and Peace thickness, right? Insane. You know when I stopped full time? When I got married. And it's the old story of
met a girl.
Yeah. Well, how do you justify spending, $50, $60 every week or whatever? Even at those prices then, like I couldn't really justify it anymore. So I eventually stopped.
Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you.
I don't know why. I mean, I still go to the cons and I still buy randomly, and I still got all my long boxes. I got like 12 long boxes at home. I have no desire to ever get rid of my books, man. But like,
yeah,
I do miss collecting full time.
I just miss reading sometimes. Just making the time to go in stores and find new things, and just so much of the energy of going in stores and going, oh, what is that? And discovering something new and picking up books and and discovering new characters and things. That was just such a fun time period. And that's why, like, when Kirkman was talking about like going into a store and seeing the Youngbloods poster up there, and that became like this big eye-opening moment for him. Man, I remember that. I remember like being a big Marvel kid growing up and then getting into all of this stuff like Saga and all of these books that I wouldn't have thought would existed 20, 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Man, speaking about Youngblood, that was all those first Image books, man. Could not wait to get them. Then I got Youngblood #1. I read it and I'm like, it's okay. Like, the art got me there, of course. Rob got me there. But, Spawn was just a cut above. And this is all due respect to the other 6 guys, but there was just something different about Spawn. The story was so much richer and so much deeper. And,
yeah,
but no, I was all those #1s locked away in a closet right now. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm such a visual guy. Of course, like I also write. So it's like, of course, like I appreciate writing. I appreciate the storytelling, but there was a certain time period, man, where, yeah, I might not have been a guy that collected Spawn and read the books, but he just jumped off the page, like the big flowing cape and, the glowing eyes and the chains and everything. It there was nothing else that looked like it. It's the same thing with Witchblade. There was nothing else that looked like it. That's why I say when you see Mark Silvestri covers, nothing else like it out there.
It's true. Yeah. Yeah, man. And got into Savage Dragon. I mean, I got into all of them. It's again, it's crazy. And I love that doc was called So Much Damage because, man, in the best possible way, they disrupted the entire industry. And I'll bet, Phil, a lot of people said, I give it a year. Like, look where we are. It's freaking 2025. This started in 92. Isn't that insane?
Yeah, what a great title for the documentary because of the impact that they had on the industry, and just also when you look at like what that did for these guys' reputations. I mean, we got into a little bit with Jim Lee and how kind of unfairly people thrusted this responsibility on him to be this indie guy after he peaked with Marvel in a way
Mhm.
that most artists don't get a chance to. And it's easy to try to call him a sellout or say that he because I mean selling Wildstorm to DC and then ended up going back to Marvel and doing the Heroes Reborn stuff, but also, man, it's his career, and I can't fault him for any of those decisions. He did what was best for him, what's best for his family, and I respect it. I respect all of his contributions to comic books, whether I agree with all of his decisions or not. It's his decision to make.
I got a lot of love for Jim. It's cool now. I got over it. No, I agree. Wasn't it funny, by the way, in the doc when Jim's like, people make out like we're heads. He goes, we didn't hate those guys. They didn't hate us. I went back and worked for them. And it cuts to Rob's like, yeah, we hated those guys.
Yeah. No, I definitely think at the time there were
Oh.
hard feelings because, man, there was so much built around leaving and sticking it to them. So it's like, yeah, we got Jim, and Jim's never going to go back. And Jim
Yeah.
ended up going back. And it's like, well, actually, when you look at it in retrospect, you can see that happening a mile away, Jim going back.
I mean, they just, sometimes I wonder if they downplay the infighting or if they're being completely blunt and honest and we know everything. I mean, I just wonder how tense it got back, behind the scenes.
Valentino coming in and being the guy that righted the ship and changing image from being what we described, the big muscles and the big superhero books, and changing it to this alternative brand where you could get something like Bitch Planet and all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And really, he saved the company. He really did.
He did.
And then for his work, he ended up getting pushed to the side for Erk Larsen, and him admitting I was not happy about that. And Erk Larsen was like, "Well, needed to be done."
Dude. And Jim's like, "Oh, it's okay now." And they're like, "Are you okay now?" It's like, "Oh yeah, we're good." I'm thinking, "You are not good. You are so not good. I can so tell you're not good with him."
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. I mean, but it's the classic phrase. Artists, we're sensitive about it. So
Yeah.
and it's not just they're sensitive about something. They stepped out and they took a stand on something, and so that meant something.
It did.
To take a stand against the two biggest companies in this industry. Yeah, I could see people feeling a way like, wait a minute, I thought you were over here with us. Why are you back over there?
Yeah. Jumping back and forth as wrestling fans also, we know how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, to to do another wrestling comparison, Jim Lee in a lot of ways is Seth Rollins to me. He's a guy that had this love from indie people like, oh man, Ring of Honor and Tyler Black, and then he went to company and became company man, waving the flag. It's like,
Right, yeah.
but I get it. I respect it, man. Like it may not be what you want for him, but these guys can't be, what you want from all the time. They got to think of what works for them in their lives and their families.
Right, yeah.
It's very hard to make money as a comic book artist, man. And so that's why I'm like, I get it, man.
Yeah, I mean, Todd's story of getting into the business is fantastic, and he sent in like daily, weekly when he was mailing in submissions. He just and Todd has always downplayed his own success and basically said, I'm not smart. Like, I just did this because no one else had done it and it needed to be done. Like, anybody could have done it. I just happened to be the guy that did it. And he's like, the only reason I got a job is I never left them alone. They just got tired of me and gave me a shot. And he really believes that too.
So great. I love how matter of factly he is about everything in the documentary. I love the connection between him and Bendis at one point being the guy that was going to take over Spawn, and he's just like, I just didn't connect with the characters like that, and that totally makes sense with what you know about Bendis and the books that were his claim to fame. He's more of a street level guy. He's more of a a guy that does like the detective stuff and the snappy dialogue that doesn't really work as well with something as dark and gritty as Spawn. And so I totally buy his story that he's like, well, I was going to head to Marvel anyway. They were offering him Ultimate Spider-Man, which turned out to be a massive success, to say the least.
Oh,
but
yeah.
McFarlane getting upset with him and firing him because he's like, oh, you got to go over there and write Spider-Man? Get out of here.
Yeah.
It was a total misunderstanding. And I tie that to being at a convention once. I can't remember where. It might have been Wizard World. And I remember there was this big Todd McFarlane. I think it was like a "This Is Your Life" type thing where he did like a retrospect on his career, and he had a whole panel and everything. And so it was right before this Bendis panel, and I will never forget Bendis coming in there, and he's talking about. I think he was writing Avengers at the time, and he had Alex Maleev up there with him, I think, and he was like, "Oh, we got sandwiches here." He said, "Todd McFarlane sandwiches." And he's sitting up there like enjoying this big tray of sandwiches that are meant for Todd McFarlane.
It's great.
And so of course, at panels, if you've ever been to conventions, you can go and hop in line and ask the creators questions. And so I'll never forget, he's like, well, if I like your question enough, I'll give you a Todd McFarlane sandwich. And so Jack comes up and he's asking the question. He was like, I don't have an answer for you, but how about a sandwich?
Oh, that's great.
I hope that they're getting along now because that story legitimately sounds like it's just a misunderstanding.
Right, yeah. Todd's the only one to never go back and play for the other two again.
And that totally makes sense with how adamant he was about leaving. And, Rob gets credited as it's his idea. But you could see that Todd, out of all of them, was the one that believed in it the most. Like, no, he was ready at that time to leap, and he was planning to leap and never look back. And I respect him for that. But I also respect others for understanding, what their needs were and not being able to continue to do that.
Well, because everyone's situation is going to be different. When you get families involved, it changes the game for everybody.
Yes. Rob telling his Tom Cruise story, also very funny.
Wonderful. Look, you're going to be late. You got to call somebody. You got to let us know. So awesome.
Yeah, he had several great stories. His Eazy-E story was also great.
Yes. I mean, look, we've said this before, and I'm sure a lot of people already know this. Comic books mean so much, to so many people. I mean, Jimi Hendrix singing, "I'm standing next to a mountain, I chop it down with the edge of my hand." Come on. I mean, the Temptations sing, "I could turn the gray sky blue. I can make it rain whenever I wanted to." These are comic books, man. This is, and so many guys and gals through the years have been so everything, like Wu-Tang Clan. There's so many groups and bands and singers and artists and from all walks of life, from every culture in the world, who have been inspired by a hero, by a story, by an outfit, by something. It's crazy, man. It's insane how far it reaches.
Yes. But yeah, just, man, I love so much about the story of Impact, man. Again, just have nothing but respect for what those guys attempted to do and their impact on the industry that could be still felt. Um, Man, the Kirkland stuff and Kirkland telling the story of just giving Eric a ride to the O'Hare Airport. I think they were going to O'Hare, right? Because they were in
I think
Chicago.
so. Yeah.
And him not going where the airport is, but he's like, this is, sure, I'll give you a ride. And that turned into, what his career is. And he ended up being a partner over there. And I love that they talk about that's what Image was supposed to represent, somebody like Kirkland. And this being the thing that was, the thing that propelled him. And he's been one of the best success stories to come out of there. That's such a great story.
It is. Yeah. And he, him lying about what the zombie books were because Valentino told him that zombie books don't sell. So he sold it as aliens are behind it. That's who's behind it. He's like, all right, well, fine. That sounds good. And they signed him. And then Valentino's saying, if he'd just told me it was a story about a guy and his son, I would have signed it. I would have said yes, but he didn't tell me that.
Just think about it this way. At that time period, him saying that zombie books don't do well and being worried about doing this book. And now that book is what a lot of creators are chasing. Something like that ends up being licensed and turned into IP that becomes a TV show. Like, that's the dream for a lot of people.
Mm.
And Kirkman still looks at it like, oh, well, Walking Dead got made into a TV show. That's great. But partner at Image Comics, what? Get out of here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what mattered the most to him. I mean, like you said, that's everyone's chasing that. Every creator's chasing the thing. And it's less to do with that about money than it is, I think, to do with about, I don't know, maybe recognition, maybe validation that, yes, I have worked very hard and this is my payoff, is that now I get this.
Yeah, I mean, well, I also understand just where Kirkman's coming from. Like, these are things that you read as a comic, that you had the posters on your wall. Like, these are things that you were a fan, and to be able to be a part of the legacy of this, you can't write a better story of that than that for someone. Like, that'd be like if I ever got to draw anything for what Milestone Media is right now. I probably spend 2 days crying. Like, it'd be the greatest thing that's ever happened to me.
Of course. Yeah, I had dreams at one point of being a comic book writer. Like, you never say never. It's never too late. I mean, I'm not dead
dreams
yet.
At one point.
I did. No. I know it sounds terrible, but I grew up with a friend who he was always the artist. I was always the writer, and we had an entire comic book universe on paper, and our own characters, our own storylines, even secondary characters, and you name it. Entire runs of books that were never written and never drawn, but that was the dream, is that one day we're going to make it. And then, you start working, you got to start paying bills, you're helping out around the house. And then I think for a lot of us, Phil, that you can't see past the end of your nose, right? Like, your immediate situation is the only thing you know. And it takes, I believe, someone with that hunger to say, this isn't enough. I gotta do something. Like, I think we've all had that. I know I have. But dude, sometimes it's easier said than done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it was just a certain time period where either you were a guy fiddling around with an instrument in your garage that wanted to be a rock star, or you wanted to be a comic artist. And it just was that kind of thing. Being good enough to be in comics, the same thing. It's like wanting to be a rock star, or wanting to make video games. It's like, yeah, that sounds great, but not a lot of people make it.
That's true. Like, how many college players actually make it to the NBA? The percentage is so small, it's insane.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm sure that for some people, that was a dream. For me included, I definitely wanted to draw comics at one point. But yeah, you get older and, adult stuff gets in the way, and paying bills and all the rest of the stuff, and it always worked out that way.
Yeah. Which, never say never. I gotta keep hope alive. I don't know. I just, maybe one day, who knows, crazier things have happened, of course, but as much as I'm a content creator, I'm also a content consumer. I love reading and I love, admiring the work and reading and collecting the books and being moved. Dude, I've been moved to tears. I'm sure you have too. I've been moved to tears by comic book stories. And you're
Yeah.
kind of looking around going, God, I hope no one saw that, because you don't want anybody to think you're weird. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Not just the books and the stories, but just like these people that we followed. We followed their careers and
Yeah.
like what that turned into be. And just like the pride I've had in guys like that have turned like their little indie book into this big massive success story, and that turned into so many other things for them. Um, and I think that that's one of the cool things that Image has brought to the industry.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. It's that, again, it's that punk rock, we're going to do it our way and we don't care what anybody else thinks and we're going to stick it to them. And but they did. Like, this thing could have went up in flames, man. I mean, the late books could have killed them. I mean, it could have killed them. I mean, not lack of talent, not lack of drive, but lack of, organization, lack of getting up and get moving. Like, it's just, but thank goodness that didn't happen, because, it's like, as wrestling fans, we always say there's got to be competitors. So you give guys places to work, and women. It's
Yes.
important. Image is important because not only are you given another avenue for creators to go work, but also they get to own their own characters, which is, it's the best thing ever. I can't understand why anybody would ever argue against that. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, people just have different dreams. People have different wants.
Mhm.
It's just like some wrestlers, their dream is to go wrestle for WWE because that's all they've known. And being able to perform on that stage, being able to perform at WrestleMania, it means something to them. Just like
Mhm.
being able to say, I worked at Marvel or I worked at DC means something. But I love the idea now that you could have in wrestling something like someone going, I want to be an indie wrestler. I want to go to Japan and I want to work all these other places. And it's the same thing here where I might necessarily not always have that idea of like, oh, I got to go and make it up to here to be successful. I just want to make my own little creator owned book and, make something I'm proud of, that make something that's mine.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a better industry because they're here, because they happen,
Yes.
because they're still thriving. It's absolutely better. And, what's cool is that we talked about this. This is probably what sparked my idea to do this episode. We've gotten image projects that have been optioned into animation and to live action. We have never had a full blown image universe. I don't know, Phil, if it could ever happen because everyone owns their own properties. Now, if everybody wanted to play nice and, work out a deal, which I'm sure lawyers will have to be involved at that point, and you're giving a studio the right to make this movie, that's like an Avengers style movie. I don't know if we'd ever get there, to be honest with you. Is that something that you could ever foresee, like a shared universe with a concentrated effort of these creators coming together like that?
I think the closest we probably could get is uh the inventable stuff maybe.
Mm. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. What
But
was the Invincible episode we were talking about possibly seeing a live action movie, but I think it makes a lot of sense.
yeah, I think that's the closest we'll probably get is inventable, but the difference with Marvel or something like DC is there's a big machine behind it. On DC, you've got Warner Brothers behind it. You have a whole arm of a
Mm.
production company behind it. Marvel has its own studio at this point. So there's much more going into the success of building this into a shared universe. Image doesn't have that. They don't have
Mm.
like that kind of cohesive machine behind it.
Mm. That's a thing. That's a thing, And I wonder if it were to happen, how salty would Disney and Warner Brothers be, you think? How much do you think they'd rush something out, one of them to? I don't know. It makes me curious, makes me wonder.
Yeah, I mean the industry's not the same.
Yeah.
So I don't think the competitiveness is quite the same with trying to squash something that Image is creating
Sure.
because they're just doing two different things.
That's fair.
But I would love to see some of these things turn into movies. Like every time people pitch the idea of a female James Bond movie, I was like, guys, read Velvet.
Mm.
Turn Velvet into a movie. If you guys have not read Ed Brubaker's book Velvet, it's so great. I would love to see that get made into a movie someday.
It's on my reading list, and it's on my list, but I have not checked it out yet. Yeah, definitely want to. Well, kids, that's a whole lot of Image crammed into an hour and 25, but we've probably got another hour and 25 to go, which we won't, but because there's a lot of good stuff here, man. I don't want to shortchange anything, but man, again, like creating a disruption in the best possible way. And, we'd be remiss if we didn't at least mention Jack Kirby. This idea that Todd had of, we want Image Comics to be Jack Kirby Presents. And like, oh my God. Talk about poking a bear if you do something like that, man.
Controversial.
Woo. I think I would have been here for that.
Yeah, Valentino telling this story was great. And I loved that they kind of got his blessing, and his wife called them the Image Boys. And that was kind of the thing that turned them in. That was also kind of the thing that galvanized them. Yeah, just so many great stories. There's so much here that I would love, like just the Air movie and like the making of the Air Jordans. I would love it if somebody just made like the story behind Image Comics into a movie.
Oh my God. Boy, that would be fun, wouldn't it?
And just like his smirk and everything. The funny thing about it is, I think Tom Cruise would play a great Rob Liefeld.
He's the right height, isn't he?
Yeah, just his smirk and just the way he carries himself. I think he would be perfect in that role.
Oh, man. He's too pretty. Rob's not that pretty.
Yeah, man. There's so many funny things about that time period, like the pictures of them together where they're all wearing the jean jackets in that time period. Jim Lee's got the Malcolm X hat on.
Yes. Yeah, they were tight, man. They were a unit for sure. Like yeah. I mean, they all seem to be okay now. They all seem to be really good with each other. They've appeared at cons, like on anniversary events and together. And Rob and Todd are good. And it's good. Like Rob's always going to have critics, if for no other reason, the feet and the big pouches and the big hair and the guns. The guns that look like aircraft carriers instead of actual weapons.
Oh, I love that little dig there. We needed somebody that could draw feet. That's why we needed Mark Silvestri. He was the best artist of the bunch. I thought it was very interesting when they said that. That they thought he was the best artist of the bunch.
They all said that too.
Yeah, very interesting. Like,
yeah.
I personally would have assumed they would think it was Jim Lee, but Jim Lee's probably got the biggest name of them all. He's the most popular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's, as an artist, this. There are ways. Every artist has their own style. And, for other artists to pay that kind of tribute to a guy, that's big. And it's like I've known artists in the past who can't draw a certain thing. Like they try, they just can't do it.
Yeah.
And, it seemed like Mark didn't have a problem with any of that at all.
Yeah. For most artists, it's hands and feet.
Yeah.
Certain animals like horses.
Mm.
It's certain things like that. Like I find a lot of people that excel at drawing like industrial things like buildings and cars and like big airplanes. They kind of have struggles with anatomy. And it's the other way around. Sometimes people that are very good at anatomy have a hard time of drawing like those kinds of things, like cars and vehicles and stuff.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. That's, well, again, like they had the talent. That's, Phil, you can maybe argue that even if without the organizational skills, without having ever done this before, without having a huge financial backer, which they didn't appear to have, like maybe they had to succeed just because of the sheer amount of talent. But I still think that talent will only get you so far. Remember the anthology when George talked about how they put Apple Core together and they were talking about trying to run the business. And George very bluntly says, at the end of the day, all we really knew how to do was be Beatles. It was all we were good at.
Yes.
And it's the same thing here. They only knew how to be artists and writers. That's all they really knew how to do.
Yeah. They had the idea to go out on their own, but they didn't understand like the business behind it. They didn't understand marketing because they never had to.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's true. They never had to worry about any of that. Because when that falls into your lap, that's a whole other expenditure. It's a whole other headache.
Yeah, and they're young. They're in their
Yeah.
20s. Like, not a lot of people are gonna be able to, carry the workload of being a comic artist, but also understand the business side of it.
Yeah, that's true. Into the fire. But they put themselves in it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, again, kids, I think we could keep going with this, obviously, but it's, I think we'll wrap it up here. Here's what I'll say. I just don't, and there's been other great publishers come along since him. I don't know if Dynamite's still a publisher. I can't swear to it or not. IDW, I think.
Yeah. Of course, Dark Horse.
Dark Horse, yeah.
Boom had that time period. I don't know. Boom is still around, but there are a few other indie promotions that have made waves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you call them indie promotions. Indie companies. Yeah.
Indie companies.
I know what you meant.
Wrestling is constantly on my mind. So, yeah.
Of course. I know what you meant. Yeah. But again, as fun as they are, like there's only one image. Like they opened so many doors and made it okay to do something like this without fear of getting crushed. Look, I'm always going to be a Marvel guy. I respect DC. I'm always more of a Marvel guy. Okay. But buddy, for anybody out there that thinks those two companies have always done the right thing, you are fooling yourselves. Like,
absolutely not. And yeah, these companies do not take care of artists. That's just what that's just what it is. A lot of these corporations, when there's too much money and stuff behind it, they're not going to properly take care of the artists.
So many artists today, Phil, are still passing away with nothing.
I mean, Stan was still working all the way to the end.
Yes, he was.
He was still doing appearances to make money all the way to the end.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, it's not a kind industry that takes care of its teams. It just doesn't. And, we need Image if for no other reason than to show that these men and women are worth something and a lot more than what they're getting paid by the big two. Like, think of the billions of dollars Marvel and DC have made, not just from the books, but from movies, from animation, from licensing. Like, and how many of these writers and artists are dying with nothing? It's quite frankly shameful, if nothing else.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Yeah. Kids, I didn't want to paint the big two in a great big happy shining light because that's not what the truth is. We would hope it's better now.
Yeah.
But it's not better now. And I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think Disney owning Marvel helps the situation. And I don't think Warner Brothers owning DC helps the situation. It gives them deeper pockets to back down from lawsuits and to pay out. But buddy, to get companies to pay out on anything, good luck. I mean, you need a lot of money and help on your side even to get there. I mean, it's impossible. It's ridiculous, man.
Yes. Yeah, of course, big fans of the work from DC. I was a big Marvel kid growing up. Still a big Marvel guy.
Mm-hmm.
But I also know the game. It's a cold game.
It is. Yeah, it very much is. But that's why we're glad we have Image, kids, and why we're glad we have other independent publishers out there who are, I'm very much, I've quoted this before, I'll do it again. I'm very much from the school of Kevin Smith in a lot of my thought processes and my podcasting ways and things of that nature. I mean, look, I call my audience kids. That's directly stolen from Kevin. I will admit that now. Anybody that knows Kevin knows I stole it from him. Guilty. I'll take it. Guilty. But I'm very much from Kevin Smith's school of thought when it comes to content creation. Just get it out there. Just get it out there. If only one person looked at it and it did something for them, then you won. You win. It's not about money. It's not about getting famous. He's like, I don't care about any of that. My stuff has touched people, whether some people hate it, some people love it, and they're ride and die with my creations. And he's like, that's all I care about. If I can get one person, it's all that matters. He said, the most important thing is getting your voice out there and letting it be heard. That's all that matters. So like, I stick to that, man. It keeps me going, honestly. So, yeah. But again, kids, without Image, I don't know what we have right now, honestly. So kudos to them for their accomplishments and for still going strong today. Is it ever a dream, Phil, that you think about revisiting? Do you think you'll ever get to a point where you're like, the heck with it, I'm going to send a portfolio in?
I don't know. I haven't thought about it in so long. You just get older, dreams change. That doesn't mean sometimes dreams die. They just change to something else.
Right. Well, that's fair. I thought you were going to say, you know what happens, man. Get older, dreams die, and you want to find a cliff. You know how it goes.
Yeah, sometimes I think, honestly, sometimes you spend your life wanting something, and then you get older, and it isn't as important to you anymore. And sometimes other things, become more important to you. That's just how it is.
Yeah, that's fair. I grew up with the friend I told you about earlier that was always the artist. Dude, we were 15, 16, and straight out of a comic. And I was always jealous, so jealous. Not in a bad way. He's my best friend, but so jealous of, why can't I draw like that? How do you do this? He couldn't answer it. He just could do it. But amazing. To this day, some of the coolest stuff I've ever seen. He still has a very definite style. But I found out very early I couldn't touch him, but I just fell in love with writing, and it just became like, yeah, I freaking love this. It's crazy. But you're right, man. Things change, and people move on, and dreams change, So, but it's all good. Again, we've got cool stuff here, and I'm actually got a book up right now called The Warning, which I've never checked out, and digital comics. By the way, before we wrap this up, digital comics will never be the same as a physical comic and going to a comic store / convention. Every time I buy a book and open it, even if I own the book, I will smell the book first. It's a habit. I can't explain why I do it. I always do it. I like to smell the paper.
We grew up in an era of brick and mortar and going in stores and just like being able to pick up a floppy and flip through it. And digital comics will just never have that same feeling. And I have a bunch of digital comics, but it just don't beat that feeling of going into a store. It just doesn't. Like just having a physical comic in your hand, it's just not the same.
Not the same. And it's that was my question, is what your thoughts on it. But I think if it gets people involved and gets them to a comic book store, I love it. But if people are only consuming it and never buy a book, I think that's pretty sad.
There's something to be said about that, but I do love that comic books are more accessible than ever before. Again, to go back to the wrestling analogy, in the era of tape trading, there was a time period where you didn't see Japanese wrestling. You didn't see All Japan and some of this stuff unless you knew a guy that knew a guy. Now you could just go and buy a subscription and watch all this stuff at any time you want. And it's the same thing with comics now. Like, unless you had a local comic book store, or at least you knew people that traded things, some things you just never got to read. And now you could just go and get a Comixology account or whatever account and just buy all of these comics anytime you want, or you could just readily find a store anytime you want. So I hope more people are doing that. The way people talk about the movies, and I want the movies to be this, and man, the movies will never be as good as the books. I'm one of those guys that feels that way. They'll just never be as good as the books, and you just can't expect them to be. So support the books. Go buy books.
Go buy books. Put them in your hands. Smell the pages. Just have the texture in your hands. There's nothing like it. Definitely nothing like it. Phil, before we go, let's get your last word on Image Comics.
Nothing but high praise for those 7 guys and the risk that they took so that other people could come behind them and make maybe not the same. I would say the same impact, but this it just changed the way that we see comics. It changed the way a lot of creators got into the business, and that's because of the work that those 7 guys put in, and they deserve all their flowers for that. And just the legacy that Image has created is incredible. It could have easily went under after the initial boom period, and it's still around. It's still around, creating an alternative for creators and an alternative for readers, and can't take that away from them.
No, yeah, dude, there's no doubt about it. I just, again, I can't say enough good things about these guys and about the efforts they put in. And they're just real people, kids. They're just real people. I mean, everybody is, but some things you love, some things you get into, some of your passions. If your passion has always been Star Wars, you can meet actors at cons. You can go spend thousands of dollars to get autographs and stand in line forever. There's only so close you're going to be able to get to Harrison Ford. And I'm sure Mark Hamill in real life is a joy to be around. He sure seems like it. But he's got a family. They're all busy. But, if your passion is comic books, man, that artist might live in your town. I mean, you might see him tomorrow. I mean, it's just, and plus, even if he doesn't live there, I mean, you go to conventions, and if your favorites aren't there, there's somebody there you can support. And you may be shaking the hand of the guy that creates the character that matches Deadpool's worldwide popularity. Anything's possible, folks. I mean, don't think that's crazy. I mean, being a pro wrestling fan is the same way. You can, these are real people. They're larger than life characters, but they're real people behind the scenes. So,
Yeah.
In that way, I've always loved being a comic book fan, man, because these are made by real people, which is pretty cool. All right, kids. Well, there you have it. That's the impact of Image Comics. And stay tuned. There'll be more to come. I'm sure we'll cover some other Image characters here on the show, and also dive into an animated series. We've already done Invincible. Maybe one day we'll talk about some other properties as well. And of course, Marvel and DC, because that's kind of how we roll here. But stay tuned for that and a lot more. Check us out. Follow us on all the major platforms, and we'll be back real soon. But for now, that is the impact of Image Comics.
Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.